All right, good morning, everyone. We are going to give everyone just a few seconds to get themselves logged in before we get started today. Just watching those numbers climb. All right, well, good morning. And on behalf of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, welcome, and thank you all for joining us for this future forum, The Future of Transportation, Revolutionizing the EV Industry. A special showcase presented by California State University, Dominguez Hills. My name is Shane Cullen, and I oversee events for the LAEDC, and I will be your Zoom tech for today. We have a star-studded program of presenters and panelists who will be sharing their insights with you today. But before we start, let me explain how you can talk to us during the webinar. If you're having technical difficulties during this webinar, please use the chat feature to send those concerns directly to us. This can be found in the controls at the bottom of your screen. We will be answering questions during the panelist portion of today's program. To submit questions, please utilize the Q&A feature, which can also be found in the controls at the bottom of your screen. Again, if you would like to submit questions for the panel, we ask that you utilize the Q&A feature. We will be sending you all relevant links next week, including a link to the webinar recording. And don't forget, join the conversation online by utilizing the hashtag LAEDC Future Forum. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the CEO of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, Bill Allen.
Thank you, Shane, and good morning, everyone. On behalf of all of our colleagues on the staff and board of the Los Angeles County Economic Development Corporation, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the latest in our series of LAEDC Future Forums. This one, The Future of Transportation, Revolutionizing the EV Industry. My colleagues and I offer these forums as part of our LAEDC mission to help reinvent our regional economy to collaboratively advance growth and prosperity for all in our region. We share the knowledge of experts in various fields in these future forums, as we will with you today, so that we can all be better informed as we develop strategies and tactics to advance our own enterprises and diversify our talent development systems in the region to feed the rapidly transforming industry sectors here, such as transportation, that are shaping the very economic future of the Los Angeles County region. But we couldn't do this without our partners and sponsors of these future forums, so I want to take a moment to acknowledge them. I'd first like to thank our presenting sponsor, who's been with us since the inception of these forums more than 5 years ago, and that is California State University, Dominguez Hills. They had the foresight to partner with us from the very beginning to bring these conversations to the public and serve as the Future Forum Series presenting sponsor for each of the years. They are now in their 6th year of bringing this wonderful resource to you all. California State University Dominguez Hills is a diverse, welcoming community of learners and educators collaborating to change lives and communities for the better. With strong academic programs and dedicated faculty mentors, supportive staff, and many campus amenities, CSU Dominguez Hills is committed to connecting students to a high quality and transformative education while providing our communities with a vital resource for diverse talent, knowledge, skills, and leadership needed to thrive today and tomorrow. We're also joined in this particular future forum by our partners at Waymo as the featured sponsor of this electric transportation discussion. Waymo's mission is to make it safe and easy for people and things to get where they're going. From moving people to moving goods, Waymo is taking autonomous driving to new places, and we're thrilled to have them on board as well as our featured sponsor today. But I'd like to invite a key leader from our presenting sponsor and longtime series partner at California State Dominguez Hills to share a few words with you this morning, and that is the Vice President for Administration and Finance, Deborah Wallace. And let me note that Deborah joined CSUDH just last year after a distinguished decade of service and leadership at Cal State Northridge. And we're delighted that she's here with you all today to say welcome on behalf of California State University, Dominguez Hills. Deborah, welcome.
Thank you, Bill, for that kind acknowledgement. It is my honor to welcome each of you to today's forum, The Future of Transportation, Revolutionizing the EV Industry. On behalf of the Toro Nation, we thank you immensely for your valued partnership. To all the distinguished leaders and education partners joining us today for this important forum, I am sending a virtual smile and handshake, and I bring greetings on behalf of our visionary leader, Dr. Thomas A. Parham, President of CSUDH. Dr. Parham wanted to be here today, but we have not found a way for him to be in two very important events at the same time. He asked that I share CSUDH's commitment to the mission of the LAEDC as a collaborative partner in fostering, cultivating, and growing the economic footprint in our region. Even during this unprecedented time of a global pandemic, CSUDH continues to harness opportunities, and we are committed to remaining steadfast and unwavering in our quest to develop future leaders that bring to their respective industries effective change that improves the lives of all human beings. As we continue to advance our mission of transforming lives that transform America, our students continue to make an impact in the region and in the world. CSUDH continues to develop into the model urban university. How are we challenging ourselves to do so? We are leveraging every opportunity to give our students robust curriculum, innovative spaces, and living learning facilities to thrive. Mark your calendars. On October 15th, we will showcase not one, not two, not three, but 4 new spaces during our grand opening celebration. With this unveiling, we add over 250,000 gross square feet of facilities designed to be game changers for our students, faculty, and staff. Our state-of-the-art science and innovation building includes a fabrication laboratory, labs for K-12 teachers, demonstrations and training, and collaborative workspaces that will help prepare the STEM educators of tomorrow. The new Innovation and Instruction Building is another transformative project, a striking 4-story structure that serves as the new front door of the campus. This fall, CSUDH welcomed to our new students to new dormitory style housing, a new dormitory style housing complex with space for over 500 students to reside on campus. This new living learning community has already become a robust hub of engagement for our students, and they love it. Our 4th space will house our new 3-time National Esports Collegiate Conference champions, and our president has touted that our esports program is a strategy, not an outcome. The new space, once fully built out in November 2021 in the LeCaine Library, will be a state-of-the-art lab and centered in 4 pillars, which are academics and research, community engagement, competition, and entertainment. I could go on for days about the wonderful things happening at CSUDH, but I believe my time is up. Again, I want to welcome each of you as we listen to the experts share the vision on revolutionizing the EV industry. Bill, with that, I'll turn the Zoom space back over to you.
Thank you, Deborah, for that great, brief but great recap of the exciting things going on your campus. And I would frankly urge all of our visitors today to take a visit to Cal State Dominguez Hills. I've been on campus many times. It is a vibrant, exciting, future-looking place. A perfect partner for us in this work and a tremendous economic engine for the LA County area. I know Deborah joins me in wanting to begin the program now, so let's hear from our first keynote speaker. I want to give her a proper introduction because we're really honored to have her with us. Diana Zhou is the Senior Director of Global Business Development for Virgin Hyperloop's projects team. She leads strategy company initiatives related to project and regional opportunities, analyzing critical decisions on project development to achieve commercialization goals and identify key risks. She's also a member of the Global Shapers Community, an initiative of the World Economic Forum. Diana holds an MBA from the Wharton School of Business at the University of Pennsylvania and an MPA International Development from the Harvard Kennedy School, where her focus was on the intersection of business, technology, and economic development. And she's received a grant from the Harvard Ash Center for Democratic Governance and Innovation for her research on the development of an electric vehicle industry in China. We're thrilled to have her with us. Diana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bill. It is really an honor and a pleasure to be here with everyone today. We're thrilled to be a part of the Future Forum initiatives at LAEDC, and I'm really excited to be with you today from our offices, from Virgin Hyperloop's offices in the Arts District in LA. We actually have a ton of really exciting stuff going on, some of which you see behind me today. which I'll talk about in a little bit. I'm here to talk about the future of electric mobility. I am our Senior Director of Global Business Development, which basically means I go around the world talking to governments, talking to transportation providers, rail operators, airport operators, you name it, all different types of private and public sector players to figure out how can we deploy Hyperloop in today's world. Next slide, please. You may wonder, what is Hyperloop? Hyperloop is a new form of transportation of which we've developed. Pods travel at speeds of up to 670 miles per hour in a near vacuum environment in our tube, which you see in that slide here, using our proprietary magnetic levitation and electric propulsion system. So the entire thing is electrically propelled. You may wonder, is Hyperloop a type of electric vehicle? What is the relationship there? And the answer to that is it absolutely is. It is, think of it like a long range network of electric vehicles. The picture that you see here is actually a picture of our system. We have a passenger or cargo fuselage, which is very similar to a small aircraft. It can carry up to 28 people per pod. We also have a bogie, which is the thing that the fuselage is hanging from, which includes our propulsion system as well as our levitation system. And all of that runs in our low pressure environment, where we take all of the air, mostly all the air out of the tube, and we operate it at 1/1000th of atmosphere pressure. And all of this is controlled with our autonomous control platform. So there are no drivers, no pilots on the system itself, but rather we have it developed an autonomous control platform and our own fleet management system that moves these pods within a network in an on-demand manner. Next slide, please. Thank you. Not only is Hyperloop a really cool technology, I think all of us here are very excited about new technologies and what new technologies can bring. But most importantly, I think when I go out and talk to many leaders around the world today, they are interested in Hyperloop because it can achieve really ambitious sustainability goals. We've essentially developed a new baseline for shared electric mobility to fight against climate change. And this is something, climate change is something that we're facing today in California and also globally. Compared to short haul flights, Hyperloop can be 10 times more energy efficient. We did a study and looked at Hyperloop connecting Chicago, Columbus, and Pittsburgh, and it could offset more than 2.4 million tons of CO2 emissions, and that's just for one route. Similarly, in the Middle East, we've looked at a connection that could move over 45 million passengers per year. And because it is the Middle East and because there's a lot of sun there, it could be fully powered by solar power. Next slide, please. Not only is it sustainable, it can also power rapid social economic growth. So we see this a lot when we see cities and regions being connected in ways that they have never been connected before. I mean, imagine being able to go from LA to San Francisco in just about 30 minutes, or LA to Las Vegas in about the same amount of time. Being able to make those connections is extremely important to us as an economic region, and be able to tie into those jobs, those families, friends that are in those different cities, and be able to make those connections at speeds faster than ever before. So for the same project that I mentioned on the previous slide, when we looked at Hyperloop connecting Chicago, Columbus, and Pittsburgh, that was estimated to create $300 billion in economic benefits. So not just the benefits of moving people around, but also the impact on the economy and the social economic benefits from that. Hyperloop today, we are part of the Virgin family. We are based, as I mentioned, here in the Arts District in Los Angeles. We also have a test site in the middle of the desert outside of Las Vegas, where we've done over 500 tests since the middle of really 2016. We've had that type test site for the last roughly 6 years. We have just over 300 employees and we're growing every day. I recommend for those of you who may be interested checking out our careers page. We've got a ton of openings and growing at a rapid pace. We've got over 200 patent applications and we've raised over 500 million in funding from private investors. We are also redefining mobility right here in Los Angeles. So what makes us really a really exciting company, we actually started in a garage in the neighborhood of Los Feliz in 2014. And you see here our CEO and co-founder, Josh Geigel, working from a garage. We've really built this kind of from that place. And in the beginning of 2015, we moved to the Arts District, where we actually took over an old ice mill, an old ice factory and a textile mill, and we converted that into our current headquarters at Virgin Hyperloop. What has been really exciting over the last 8 years, really since 2013, when the Hyperloop concept was first created, was that is the pace at which this has grown and developed over the last 8 years. I mean, from an idea, from a concept, to having the first Hyperloop companies established in 2014, to opening our first test site in Apex, which is our site out in Las Vegas, to having the first full system development test in 2017. And then from there, I mean, from the time that the technology has really been prototyped and developed, we've seen a ton of progress, a ton of pickup on the government and federal rulemaking side. So both in the US as well as the EU, and also what we don't have here in the Middle East and in India, where we've got a lot of engagements as well. So in the US, there was the Net Council, which was created under the US Department of Transportation to look specifically at Hyperloop, as well as other new modes of transportation. And then similarly in the EU, we've seen a ton of excitement, a ton of pickup from DG Move, which is their Director General of Mobility, to look at Hyperloop specific initiatives. In 2020, in November of 2020, we had the first Hyperloop travel safely we had the first humans travel safely in a Hyperloop. So we did a big test with our CEO, Josh Geigel, and Sarah Lukian, who was our head of passenger experience. And then really, really exciting earlier this year was Hyperloop was included in the US infrastructure bill. And so part of what we've been working on is actually understanding how we can get Hyperloop to be one of these modes of transportation that is part of the transportation planning process. And a big piece of that was actually getting into the infrastructure bill as this new mode of technology and qualified for a lot of the federal level initiatives and programs. So it's been an incredible pace of development that we've seen in both on the technology side, but also on the industry side over the last few years. Finally, I just want to highlight this test that we did at the end of last year, where the first passengers traveled safely on a Hyperloop. It was with our two-seater prototype vehicle, and we demonstrated many of the Hyperloop safety critical systems. All of this was embarked on a 1.5-year program, and that was verified by our independent safety assessor, Certifer, which is a renowned safety assessor that does a lot of this work all over the world for rail and other types of programs. And what was really important in this was not that, was not the speed, was not the number of passengers taken, was not really even the fact that we did it in a vacuum. What was really important was that now we can finally answer, does a Hyperloop work, and can people travel safely in it? And we can now answer, yes, it can. And that's been huge for us because it's really demonstrated that the technology works. It works for people, and this is really the first step in actually making it commercializable. So in terms of commercial deployment, because I know this is a question that comes up often, we are currently working on a bunch of pilot programs around the world today in order to deploy this new technology out into the market, and with the objective of becoming commercially getting to commercial deployment by the end of the 2020s, around 2029 or 2030. So we're really excited to be here today. I'm really excited about the panel and to see all the different technologies that we're talking about today. We believe that this next decade really is the decade of Hyperloop, but we want to usher in this new era of mobility with all of you guys. We think Hyperloop is just one piece of the puzzle here. We think there's a ton of opportunity for all different modes to work together, and we're really excited to hear from the panelists later today. Thank you, Bill. Over to you.
Thank you, Diana. And you are a very exciting piece of the puzzle. We're thrilled to have Hyperloop here in the Arts District in downtown LA. Virgin Hyperloop's an exciting company. We're just delighted to hear all the progress you've been making. The fact that it's now in the infrastructure bill and that the projects around the world are moving forward and you've had successful tests. These are wonderful developments from a very exciting company with a really breakthrough technology, and we're delighted to have you on the program this morning. Now we'll turn to Joby Aviation. I'd like to introduce our featured speaker, Bill Goodwin, who's the Deputy General Counsel at Joby Aviation, another very exciting company here in California. Bill oversees policy and regulatory engagement in markets around the world, and Joby Aviation has raised more than $2 billion to revolutionize how we move in cities by building an all-electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. Founded in 2009, Joby employs more than 800 people with offices in Santa Cruz, San Carlos, and Marina, California, as well as Washington, D.C. and Munich, Germany. Prior to Joby, Bill led the policy and regulatory team and was the first legal hire at Skyrise, which operated a mostly stealthy air taxi service in Los Angeles while building the technology foundation for self-flying helicopters. He's also an advisor and investor in startups in highly regulated industries, especially in the mobility space. And he's with us this morning to share a little bit of the exciting things that are going on at Joby Aviation. Bill, welcome.
Many thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. It's great to be here with LAEDC. My start, I guess, in the policy world actually goes back to working with the Rose Institute of State and Local Government and LAEDC on projects. So it's a bit of a throwback to being a fairly impoverished grad student. But yeah, really great to be here with everybody and have this opportunity to share a little bit about the Joby vision. It's wonderful also because Joby is now recently public. We can be a little bit more open about our sharing of our plans. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will dive into an overview of what Joby is. But I'd also like to have folks be thinking while I'm chatting about what Joby is doing, how this might apply in Los Angeles. While we haven't disclosed publicly what markets we're launching in, I think really making the technology that we're talking about concrete requires you to think about how it's going to interact with the environment that we have in Los Angeles. I'm in Los Angeles myself, though Joby is headquartered elsewhere. So this is the legal disclaimer associated with being a public company, but the problem statement that we face is one that I think is pretty familiar. It's a little bit different than the challenge that Hyperloop faces, which is really obviously about connecting folks between different cities. What Joby is looking at is the challenge that we face inside of our cities. Congestion is something we're all familiar with, and it's been really fascinating to see how it's come back in such strange ways post-COVID. The mode shift back to personal mobility is really challenging the environment that we live in. And the solutions to it are not easy, especially in two dimensions. Existing infrastructure is taxed. Putting new infrastructure, whether it's rail or roads, is incredibly politically challenging, but also incredibly expensive. And so while Joby can't claim that we're going to solve congestion, I do think the somewhat intractable nature of some of these challenges points to a rich and holistic set of solutions. And one of them, we believe, is unlocking the third dimension. And that's what we believe aerial ride sharing can do for major metropolitan areas around the world, and ultimately connecting folks between metro areas out to smaller communities. So aerial ride sharing as a concept is, think Uber Pool in the sky, pooling riders on vehicles that can take them in that direct as the crow flies trip instead of the indirect routes that we take on the ground. Some of the benefits that I think are pretty obvious if you think about it in the abstract is that it could be more sustainable. An all-electric vehicle that has 0 point of operating emissions, that could be a tremendous addition to our mobility options. Obviously, the speed is something that's unparalleled. If you think about flying over a congestion or not taking those indirect routes, there's a host of different reasons why you might want to urgently get across town. But I think what's important for us to think about, particularly today, is as we see some of the challenges in getting a big infrastructure bill through in a very contested fashion, and we understand really the cost of building new infrastructure, what can we do to augment mobility in cities that doesn't require massive fixed infrastructure investments? And that's a piece that the vertiport concept about reusing the rooftops of parking garages and other underutilized urban assets could be a way to add a mobility option for cities that solves some pretty interesting types of trips without requiring a massive investment and big long-term bets, which can be extremely costly and difficult to make. So what does this look like? I'll show you a video here in a second, and hopefully my bandwidth stands up, but it looks like the Joby vehicle. So this is the Joby Aircraft. It's a vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. You can see it flying there without a pilot. It's remotely piloted for much of our testing, but it will be piloted. It'll be a pilot with 4 passengers. So an air taxi model is not unreasonable given the capacity of the aircraft. The range is 150 miles. It has a 200-mile-an-hour top speed. And as I said before, it has no operating emissions. And most impressively, and I think most, what I think is most intriguing for this group is it's actually real. So you don't have to take my word for it. This is a quick video of our aircraft in action at our flight test base on the central coast of California. And what I love about this video is it really gives you a sense of what we're talking about and what the vehicle will actually be able to do. This is our flight test crew monitoring the vehicle remotely, but it will be piloted, as I said. And what it can do is take off and land vertically like a helicopter. And then you see those propellers transitioning forward. It pivots into wing-borne flight. And once it's on the wing, this will fly like an electric airplane, except one that flies fast with incredible redundancy, because each of those propellers has an amount of redundancy behind it in dual motors, dual windings, dual battery connections, so that we can actually achieve a level of safety and a level of efficiency when flying on the wing there that's unparalleled in aviation. But then we have the ability when we come to land to either land as a conventional aircraft or to turn those propellers back vertically and land as you might land a helicopter. So all of that gives this aircraft a performance capability that's unparalleled in current aviation. And as I said, it's not just something that's happening in the future. It's something that's real today. And what you couldn't hear there, because I didn't do the audio on a bit of our hype video, is actually the noise profile of this aircraft. Because it's going to be amazing if you can take off and land in and around an urban environment. But we also need to make sure that it's a service that actually benefits the community. I think everybody here probably has had some experience with existing aviation that's been frustrating because of noise or pollution. And it's been one of the great limiters of our ability to use helicopters and to have VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, operate in environments. The Joby aircraft is designed to be quiet and has been designed for over 12 years now. It was one of the key design elements that was chosen in order to produce what we have today, which is a vehicle that is so quiet that we routinely during noise testing have trouble picking up the aircraft in overflight. We just did a spate of noise tests with NASA over the past 2 weeks. One of the big challenges, amusingly enough, was that we had to keep cutting the grass shorter because the ambient noise from the grass at our flight test base was drowning out the ability to actually measure the overflight noise of the aircraft. Now, this aircraft isn't perfectly silent, but it's a game changer in terms of how quiet it is and how acceptable that might be for a community. Another piece that I think is important to remember is to bore you with some tedious details on what this is going through, what our aircraft is going through from a go-to-market process. While this may seem like the Jetsons, there is an established regulatory process for bringing new aircraft to market. And one of the key decisions we made early on in Joby's design, looking at a whole host of different options, was how do you make this fit within the existing regulatory system so that it can grow and mature in capabilities over time. But right out of the gate, we have the ability to operate. We have the ability to actually fly today. So that means that we are working through the certification process. You can see some of the milestones here, and I'm happy to chat about them in greater detail, perhaps in the Q&A. But suffice to say, we are working our way through the process and have been since 2018 and are targeting the end of 2023 for our type certificate, at which point we will be able to operate these aircraft commercially. And again, it's not just how the aircraft is certified, but also how it operates. There are a set of rules that allow helicopters and planes to fly today, and the Joby vehicle has been designed to actually fit within those. So again, dispense with the assumptions you may have had that flying cars will be purely autonomous and they'll take off and land from anywhere. We are working closely both with the FAA and a host of different other regulatory authorities, including state and local folks right here in California, and the good folks at the City of Los Angeles and the Urban Movement Labs work that they've been doing to ensure that we actually have a way to operate today in the greater LA area. Again, what you see here are some of the rules that would apply typically to how you fly, to the pilots and their licensure, and how you access airspace. All those things are things that we've been working on for more than a decade to ensure that Joby has the ability to actually operate. So the last piece that I'll flag is a recognition that I think you can't be around for 12 years without learning a lot of hard lessons. And one of them is it really will take a host of different partnerships to make this real. Why? Because Joby isn't just building these aircraft or designing them and having somebody else build them. We're also going to manufacture them. And we're not just going to manufacture them, we're also going to operate them as what you saw earlier. It's called a Part 135 air carrier. So we will be the operator, the manufacturer, and the designer, and we're co-creating new infrastructure for those takeoff and landing sites. That's an incredible burden to bring to a go-to-market exercise. But fortunately, we have aligned some of the most robust partnerships, I think, in the world that you could have. Toyota, for instance, invested more than $400 million in our Series C and has been partnered closely with us on developing that manufacturing strategy. Uber is an investor, and we acquired the Uber Elevate team, which had worked on this for 4 years and brought all that knowledge and their market insight into Joby to help refine how we actually bring an Uber pool-like service to the skies. As well as on the infrastructure side, some of the biggest names in aviation or in kind of new modes of repurposing urban infrastructure and urban parking garages like Reef, as well as big investors like Macquarie and Related, and many more to announce soon. So with all that in mind, I want to pause just on a little bit of a call to action here as we move into the panel. That's a tremendous vision, but what it'll actually mean for the places where we operate is going to be very unique and very specific. It'll mean hubs for operations and new maintenance jobs, which are going to require a bunch of specialized training. That'll probably mean partnerships with our local community colleges to develop those aviation mechanics, which is a whole new set of essentially future-proof jobs. Something that is both accessible from an entry-level worker environment, but also high-tech skills that will serve the community going forward. It also looks like development of new infrastructure. So it looks like an opportunity to partner with a variety of different parts of the community that might be underserved today by mobility options, or might have infrastructure that needs to be revamped, and we can bring private capital to those places. And then it means a new type of mobility option for the region. We're not going to solve all of your congestion, but we can complement what people can do today on the ground with something that can't be done on the ground at an incredibly robust and affordable cost. So with all that in mind, really excited about the panel conversation today and appreciate the opportunity to share some of the vision. And again, invite everyone to think about the reality that this is going to bring to places like Los Angeles in the next 4 years. Since we have raised more than $2 billion, this is going to happen. And now it's time to get down to some really fun and concrete brass tacks as to what deploying a service like this could mean in a transformative way for a place like Los Angeles.
What an exciting presentation, Bill. Just what you and Diana have both shared with us this morning makes me really glad to be alive at this time in history. The future is going to be truly exciting here in LA and around the world because of the technologies that your companies are pioneering for us. We have an expert panel coming up now that I think you will find not only an opportunity to hear more from Diana and Bill, but our additional speakers and have a chance to ask some questions. But before we transition to that panel, I want to remind you, you can join our conversation on social media by using the hashtag LAEDC Future Forum. We really encourage you to do that because it helps us get the word out to more people about the exciting developments in these technologies here in the Los Angeles region. Now I'd like to introduce the moderator for our expert panel this morning, Justine Johnson, who's the head of mobility engagement in Southern California and Southwest region for the Ford Motor Company. Justine is a proud native of Los Angeles. For the past 8 years, though, she's resided in New York City working on transportation initiatives under both the Bloomberg and de Blasio administrations. In 2018, she joined Ford Mobility's City Solutions team and is working with municipalities and communities on mobility solutions that help move people and goods more efficiently and effectively throughout our region of the United States. She's the perfect person to moderate this conversation. And I'm going to turn the rest of the program over to the very capable hands of Justine Johnson. Justine, welcome.
Thank you so much, Bill, and thank you to LAEDC and as well as to Cal State Dominguez Hills for such an amazing conversation that I'm looking forward to having with a number of panelists here. What I'm going to do is just in terms of run of show, we're just going to invite Diana and Bill back on to join this panel. But before I do that, I want to introduce 2 additional panelists to this particular conversation. One being Darren Elliott, and I'll just do a very brief bio, and then I will transition to Laura. So I'll start off with one, Diana, and Bill, feel free to join back on with your cameras. And Darren Elliott, just a quick bio. He is the Senior Vice President of Operations for Zero Electric Vehicles. He has over 30 years of experience in risk management, data analytics, strategic planning, operations, and really does a lot of work around customer service across various industries. And really supports startups and large corporations. And I think this is a really exciting time and conversation for us as we think about really the future of electric vehicles and as well as the future of electrification. So thank you so much, Darren, and looking forward to our conversation. Next, I'll just jump right into our next panelist, Laura Renger, who is the Director of Electrification and Customer Services Policy at Southern California Edison's Regulatory Affairs side of the shop there. And so really excited to have her in this position. Laura is responsible for utilities regulation, legislative policies concerning transportation, electrification, and building electrification as well, and climate change, energy efficiency, and energy equity. So I want to bring all the panelists up here today, and I thank you so much. And again, I did a very condensed version of their bios. They do a fantastic stuff in their day-to-day jobs, but want to get into this conversation. So welcome to all of our panelists. And my first question for you all is, especially as we think about this particular topic on the future of transportation and revolutionizing the EV industry, I want to talk a little bit about the baseline for progress. Essentially, let's think about over the past 5 to 10 years. And really, how has this push towards electrification really changed or defined your particular industry or space that you're working in right now? So I'm opening this question to all the panelists, but would love to hear about your thoughts on this particular question. Diane, I'll start with you.
Okay. Thank you, Justine. Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, you know, what we really, the way we've designed the Hyperloop technology has changed quite a bit because of the way the electrification industry has advanced in the last really 10 years. If you look at a lot of these rail systems, especially when it comes to different types of magnetic levitation systems, which ultimately the Hyperloop is a type of maglev technology. a lot of these infrastructure, a lot of the way the maglev systems are built is through electrifying the actual infrastructure itself, and same with high-speed rail. So what that means is that you essentially have a catenary system that runs along the infrastructure, and that becomes expensive. It becomes very difficult to maintain, and it just becomes very difficult to deploy these types of systems because of the additional complexity. What we have seen over the last few years with the advancements in battery technology, just to name a few, has allowed us to really change the way we thought about designing the Hyperloop so that it is no longer a very complicated infrastructure, but we've actually moved a lot of the complicated stuff from the infrastructure to the vehicle. And so we've essentially developed it into an electric vehicle. So smart vehicle, dumb road, as opposed to smart road, and all the complexity that comes with deploying something for many, many miles that needs to be constantly maintained and upgraded. And so we wouldn't have been able to do that without all of the advancements in battery technology and in the electrification of that system. And so that's allowed us to create a system that's much more future-proof. It can be upgraded very easily. It's highly modular because now you just need to upgrade the vehicles themselves. And so it's been, I think it's been very critical in how we've taken an existing technology and being able to design it in a way that makes it a lot more adaptable to the market today.
Thank you, Diana. This is, oh, go ahead, Bill.
Thanks, Darren. Sorry to step on your toes. I was going to add, I guess, a slightly different point, which is I think the evolution of the EV industry in the past 15 years, especially the conversation around electric vehicles on the ground and autonomous vehicles, has really sharpened, I think, the public's understanding that you have to solve the right problem with the right tool, and that solving congestion is different than solving emissions at the point of operation of a vehicle. And that sometimes those two can be at odds and can be intentional with each other. And so what I think is really interesting in the past 2 to 4 years is seeing a lot of folks realize there has to be intense complementarity between the infrastructure, the investments that are being made, say for electrifying rideshare or electrifying personal automotive use, and other types of mobility options like micromobility that are going to need to draw from the grid as well. And that if you think about those things in isolation, that you may have pretty profound limitations on how quickly you can scale new types of electric mobility. So that's one of the areas that's been really gratifying to work on at Joby. Our partnership with Reef is a great example. Reef likes to use the idea of a reef and an ecosystem with lots of different uses that are complementary to each other, and transforming the existing infrastructure we have today. Again, think underutilized parking garages as presumably mode shift, though not at the moment, goes away from personal vehicle use into more ride sharing volumes, et cetera. How can you repurpose that? And then when you're doing that, you have to really think about the electric needs of a variety of different actors. So it's been a really fun exercise for us because we're just one piece of that puzzle. We're on the roof. But our electric needs, while they're not dramatic compared to Tesla, say the equivalent of 2 Tesla superchargers to supercharge one of our aircraft, they do pose unique and interesting challenges for grid partnerships, et cetera. So I think that has been a really gratifying evolution of the conversation. EVs by themselves, whether in the sky or on the ground, aren't going to solve all your problems. And you need to think about the bets that you place on the ground for a lot of different use cases.
Yeah, and this is Darren Elliott. Thank you, Bill and Diana. When you talk this comment about how has technology moved, I mean, these two companies here are a good example of 10 years ago, the idea of, flying vehicles or going through tubes in the ground, right, at a magnetic was a concept. We have 2 companies now in the last 10 years that are actually bringing things to market. So it's an exciting time to be in this EV space. For us, we're a company based out of Arizona, called Zero Electric Vehicles. We have a motto called EV for All. And what we're trying to go look at is how do we look at the situations to kind of bring electrification into the environment? How do we reduce barriers? How do we really focus on how do we increase efficiencies in vehicles and by deploying new technologies through software, through systems, in order to enhance. When you look at it today, I really want to really appreciate what Tesla has done. Tesla has made electric vehicles acceptable to the communities. It's really kind of brought that forth as something that is relevant and potentially out there for a consumer to go off and actually acquire. Electric vehicles aren't new; they've been around for a while. But the acceptance and that push of kind of that excitement of kind of going into that space has really been kind of initiated in the past 10 years. You also see it just looking at from the charging companies that are out there, from the amount of electric vehicles that are now kind of coming out to market in the next 2 to 5 years of new vehicles. If you look at the genealogy, a lot of these companies, they started about 2016, 2017. So this is a pretty new field, kind of moving fast. There's a lot of technology areas that are improving. And as Bill mentioned, what we see has really been happening out there to kind of provide this other infrastructure perspective is the focus that we're seeing from government agencies, right? About how do we push forward to kind of incentivize folks to kind of get out into there, how they're pushing targets out. You have different municipalities and states kind of bonding together through some MOUs to kind of hit zero emission targets. That's putting emphasis into the business community and the consumer community to start to go into a sustainable kind of environment. So when you see that, it's just exciting that we're seeing so many more participants come in. With participants come great ideas. And that's kind of where our company's focused on, is like, how do we do partnership and collaboration to kind of get with folks, be it the different environments, as Bill had said, that are out there, because an EV by itself cannot be successful. It's the whole infrastructure around it. It's the public-private, it's the charging infrastructure, it's the charging companies, it's the battery companies. All that innovation has to go together. And we're just happy to be kind of a player in this and start to kind of move that needle forward to kind of actually get EV for all for everybody and remove some of the barriers that are out there. One of the things for us that has kind of changed what we do, we were trying to, when we still are, we are building a vehicle that is a very long range vehicle at a very good cost efficient point. We've looked at how do we do things to make it more modular and bring down the cost of manufacture, and also allow a manufacturer for partners to go off and build vehicles around our modular platform. One of the things that we had talked about that I had mentioned was this environment that's out there from trying to incentivize corporations to move into the commercial space to actually go electric. Our initial focus has been on passenger vehicles and consumer vehicles, and how do we, remove barriers like long range, range anxiety, things of those nature. But with this increased push to really hit what I would say the greenhouse gas emission culprits that are in that commercial transportation space, we saw that our technology can actually be applied to come in and start to have a rapid pace that we can move into to kind of convert vehicles that are diesel vehicles or gas vehicles into electric in a very rapid time. And we're bringing to market in the next, with some test customers right now in the Phoenix region, and the next, and at the end of this quarter, we'll be actually delivering some vehicles out to fleet owners that actually provides a way to kind of be a truly more sustainable solution by reusing old assets and getting them back on the field, as we're still developing technologies. And this gives us a platform to kind of enhance and kind of get more efficient on how we operate the charging, how we improve battery performance through operations, and how we get more insight from the vehicles and use our software and some automation, some artificial intelligence to kind of start to optimize the systems that are on a vehicle. So it's a very exciting time, and just pleased to be part of this and part of this panel.
Thanks so much. Laura, want to give you some space as well? Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, so I really appreciate everybody's thoughts, and thank you to Cal State Dominguez Hills and LAEDC for having us today. I really appreciate everything that our other panelists said, but there's one thing that's been missing, and that's the grid. So in order to power these vehicles, you need us, and we're ready and we're excited. And so if you look at the last, kind of to get back to your original question, Justine, the last 10 years, I think what we've seen all the different technologies and such great improvements and making the cars more affordable. But let's not forget that we've also seen a lot of improvements in the grid itself and our ability to provide clean energy. And we're moving to carbon neutrality by 2045. We know that the only way to get there is through mass electrification of all sectors in our industry. And with a clean grid, that makes that possible. And it also brings these technologies to all our customers. We're really focused at Edison on making sure that we're providing that grid, that we're providing the supportive infrastructure to help with charging for our electric vehicles, and that we're making our programs accessible to all our communities. We don't want to be in a situation where a vast majority or even some of our customers have been left behind. And we've seen this in the past where our disadvantaged communities have been disproportionately burdened by all the pollution, air pollution, and then we want to ensure that going forward, access to clean vehicles is for every Californian. And so at Edison, we're focused on ensuring that we can provide the infrastructure. We have programs in both the light duty side and on the medium and heavy duty side to provide what we call the Make Ready infrastructure. This is our suite of programs called Charge Ready. And so if any of the folks listening are interested, we have programs for what we're calling hard to reach locations on the light duty side, which could be for multi-unit dwellings, for communities, colleges, various businesses. For the medium and heavy duty side, we also have Charge Ready Transport, and that's for fleets and others, buses that are looking to transit agencies who want to electrify their fleets. So we are doing our best on this end to try to make sure that we get the grid ready, that we have a clean grid, because I think that's why we see the support from our regulators and our government and legislators for electrification, is because it will provide a clean alternative and get us to carbon neutrality. So thanks, Justine.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I guess in light of this conversation about infrastructure and specifically electric vehicle infrastructure, I know that there is so much progress being made. And Laura, I think you just highlighted a number of substantial programs coming out of SoCal Edison, but wanted to know, just broadly speaking from each of the panelists, what do you think still needs to be done? What might be missing? Where are you seeing gaps? And how might that inform some of the work, especially, or align with some of the work that entities like utility providers are working on now?
Well, I can take that from the EV side. If you look at what the CEC, the California Energy Commission, estimates that we need about 1.2 million public and shared EV chargers by 2030. And so that is a huge, significant number. And, if we're looking at electrifying 7 to 8 million EVs by 2030, that's a combination of, charging at workplaces, charging at, for long distance travel, et cetera. And so I think that we really do need to make sure that we're investing. It's kind of a chicken and egg problem, if you will. We know that customers don't want to buy the electric vehicles unless they have a place to charge it. And while EV charging in a home, if you own your own home, is relatively easy and not expensive, it's much more difficult if you don't own your own home, or if you're in a multifamily dwelling. So I think we really need to focus our efforts on multifamily dwellings and in disadvantaged communities that have been neglected in the past.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Darren. Along the lines there from the challenges that exist out there, that the whole infrastructure needed for the electric vehicle space, as Laura hit on, is a tremendous challenge and also an opportunity that's out there. One of the things that we've been really working on is that, as Laura mentioned, one of the things that when we started to move into this sector for more on the commercial vehicle space was the importance of the utilities that are out there and the municipalities. I mean, they are central to electrification and electric vehicles. So getting an awareness of what they're doing, and also seeing the amounts of programs that a lot of these utility companies throughout the US are really doing to kind of incentivize folks to understand what the what is needed to electrify, from looking at how do they assess their infrastructure, putting incentive programs in play to kind of get them enabled to take their first steps. That is really a great kind of lead in to kind of build out the network out there. There's also the back end of that, as Laura mentioned, as far as the grid, right? How does the grid support this amount of electricity that's out there? And so kind of when we look at these things, those are big challenges, the ubiquity of chargers. So we start looking at how do we start to augment that and modify it by technology through onboard chargers, ways that maybe we can kind of get a little bit faster charge at shorter distances as people want to go long range. That way, the more available chargers are and the capital expense of putting charging infrastructure comes into play, I think that really accelerates the different items that are out there. I think that's one of the key things that we look at, and I think the industry looks at now, starting to look at, is that it is a system. It's a component of the infrastructure, the power companies, the charging companies, the electric vehicle companies that are out there. But it's also an understanding that the buyers, there's an economic perspective too that they got to have out there, and there's personal aspects that they have from how they need to execute their businesses, or how a consumer needs to go about to kind of go from one distance to the other in their ride profiles. So it's a large system, it's a large solution, but I think kind of just providing this more system view and understanding that it is a public and private kind of combination perspective, I think, which is unique. Having that perspective, I think, allows us to start to move forward and embrace these challenges that are out there.
Can I just add one point to that? I just think that's great, Darren. I completely agree about it being a system, but we also need to think about the benefits that electric vehicles provide, both, obviously to GHG reductions, but also to the grid. And EVs they're essentially a distributed energy resource, just a mobile distributed energy resource. And they can be used we can throttle up charging when there's excess capacity on the grid. We can throttle it down when there's a peak load. And so it has a big system benefit when they're used in that way. And so I think some of that, customer connection and making sure that we're having that relationship with the customers where it meets their need, but can also, at relatively small, inconvenience to customers, can be also used as an additional grid resource.
Thank you so much for that. And Diane and Bill, if you have any additional items, feel free to jump in. Go ahead, Diane. I saw you come off mute.
I was just going to say, I think for us, I think for electric vehicles, the challenge is the ubiquity of the charging infrastructure. For Hyperloop, it's a little bit different in that we have the network essentially that's already established. So it's not like we've got endless number of portals where customers can come in and come out. And it's really about ensuring that at those stations themselves, at our portals, we have the electric charging capability, in which case, in those specific situations, we would work with you, Laura, at SoCal Edison and other grid providers to ensure that it has that we have the support and the electrical needs that are required. I think one thing that is important for us, though, we talk about how our system has no direct emissions, which just simply means that we're not contributing to greenhouse gas emissions in the operations of the system. But obviously, as I'm sure everyone here on this panel especially is well aware of, it really ultimately, how green our system is really ultimately depends on the source of the electrification, on how it's being generated, whether or not that's being generated using renewable energy or with coal or what else. And I think for us, one of the things that we certainly look at when we are talking about our system and deploying our system around the world is what does this mean for the local footprint and how that electricity that we need to operate our system ultimately is being generated. In India, for example, where we have been working on a project between Mumbai and Pune, a lot of the generation of the electricity in that part of the world is from coal. And so, understanding what that means in terms of having a more energy efficient system and what that means in terms of the greenhouse gas impact is certainly really important for us. So So it's important for us to understand ultimately where the electricity is coming from and how it's being generated.
Thank you so much. And, I'm going to pivot us a little bit in this conversation because each of you have mentioned really exciting things that are happening in your respective ventures and respective workspaces, but I'd love to learn a little bit more about how we're thinking about workforce development and as well as recruiting and job training. And so as we see new technologies being deployed, how are we thinking about, one, making sure that we have a workforce that's ready for some of these new jobs coming online, and as well as, what should educational institutions, be thinking about, especially when we talk about workforce development and job training. And again, these are for folks who may be currently looking for work or those who are rising up through the system that might be looking for work in the future.
Well, I'll start off that with Justine. Our company, we really embrace universities and colleges. We've been actively, since we were founded, we've been actively engaged with ASU, Grand Canyon University in the Arizona area, with capstone programs and kind of doing internship programs to kind of get the understanding of what the technology is going on in our space, so that we actually try to kind of, hopefully kind of seed that into the place, or into the student force that's out there. Additionally, we've been working with several community colleges to look at how do we start to kind of identify the skill sets, identify the different disciplines that are kind of emerge in the EV industry, so that we can start helping them kind of build up and with us and other partners start building up some retraining programs or some workforce training programs, because we think that's going to be a critical asset in the future. And the more that we can excite people to get into that industry, get them retrained and be a part of that, it's just going to benefit us all. And so we're really focused on those items, and that's kind of how we're trying to approach that workforce development and the cultivation, with our colleges and our communities.
I can go next. Sure. So, we're looking at the pipeline as it's coming in, and we're seeing that there's going to be a really significant need for additional utility line workers, engineers, electricians, software development. The grid of the future is going to need folks that have skills in all of these areas. And a lot of these jobs are really good family sustaining wages, provide really good family sustaining wages. So we're really excited to see the development of, or the hope of having that many new clean jobs in the future. So we're investing a lot of money in through our philanthropic arm on STEM programs, and also on scholarships for students that are underrepresented that are going into STEM. I mean, we really feel like we need to make sure that we have a strong pipeline of women and minorities who are interested in the STEM areas and are, getting those skills for this future work. So it's exciting, but it is going to be something that we'll all need to work together on to make sure that people have the right skill sets and that, getting the training to get us there.
Yeah, I would just add that we're experiencing that firsthand at Joby already. So as you might imagine, the process of getting a certified production facility for an aircraft is a multi-year exercise. And so we've had experience as we stand up our initial production line, which is up the coast in Marina, California. We've had the experience of trying to build an affordable place that doesn't have a really robust high-tech workforce. And that's on the manufacturing side. But the same is going to be true, and I see one of the questions in the Q&A addresses this, the piloting side. Who's going to pilot these aircraft with the existing pilot shortage that we're already facing in commercial aviation? And so we've had to develop a pilot training academy and partnerships that we're going to be able to grow and we'll announce in the future, so that we have a steady pipeline of pilots. But we also think we need to work with the broader airline industry to help create opportunities for folks to get into commercial aviation and perhaps use the Joby vehicle and the Joby operation as a stepping stone. So from our perspective, each one of these pieces is a really interesting challenge from job creation. What I'd love to see is some more forward-thinking opportunities, like I've seen some of the proposals coming out of LAEDC over the past couple of years, but I think we need to see a tighter integration between the educational institutions, the existing businesses that have established, whether it's capstone projects or pipelines for particular workforce certifications, et cetera. And I think we need to try to standardize that more as something that the LA region can compete on. I will say, Darren mentioned being out in Arizona. We have evaluated a lot of different places for our high volume production line. And I was really impressed by what we saw out at the Gateway Airport, for instance, the close partnership with ASU and some of the big manufacturers there. And so I'd love to see that type of, tight-knit community replicated, not just on a one-off basis, but really become a culture that we view as a competitive advantage here in LA. Because the reality is there's a lot of different jobs that we're going to need to create. Some are in manufacturing, some are in maintenance, some are in the operations, and some of them are in piloting. And you can't really try to solve all those in isolation. So cultivating that culture here in LA, I think would be a great regional competitiveness benefit.
Bill, 100% agree. I'm an LA native. I'm based in LA. We were able to kind of get these kind of programs started in Arizona. I love to see, a bunch of businesses and us kind of start to, do this kind of program and broaden it out across the U.S. I think it's very beneficial, and especially in Los Angeles. I mean, this is a city of vehicles, right? And we're here at the forefront to try to, how do we move this forward? So I think, I love your proposal. I wish LAEDC and others, we can kind of help out to kind of move this needle forward on this.
And, I know we have just a few more minutes, but I really want to make sure I find time, because I know a few of you all have mentioned equity. A few of you all have mentioned, communities that essentially will be impacted by a number of the technologies, jobs, mobility offerings and solutions that are being discussed today. But the conversation of equity is very important. There have been improvements when we talk about gender and racial representations in the field of STEM, but we have a long way to go. This is definitely a journey that requires everyone's commitment. What support do you think your company can offer or your entity can offer as it relates to ensuring greater access for, women and as well as those of different racial backgrounds? And then also, I want to talk about how you actually work with communities and making sure that their voices and their input is actually heard, especially as you think about your technology deployment, as you think about offerings. How do you do all that? So I'd love to hear from each of you all, especially on this topic of equity and making sure that there is better representation in these areas.
I'll jump in with a quick answer up front, and not to steal too much time, but I think the great advantage that Joby's had in this area is that we have so many different types of jobs to fill that we have to look at creatively across the entire ecosystem. And the experience in the Central Coast is a great one. We're actually in an opportunity zone in Marina, California. It is economically, compared to a lot of other areas on the coast, it's one of the more distressed areas. And like I said, the workforce isn't one that is a Silicon Valley pipeline. In fact, there's a lot of folks that we have hired and partnered with to do training from agricultural workforce skills to take them into high tech jobs. So I think the benefit that we have is that we have these specific domains that are very distinct. We're not just hiring coders. Of course, we're hiring those folks. It gives us both a need and a flexibility to align our investments in ensuring that we have a diverse and equitable pipeline. And the great thing about operating the mobility services is that the same thing is true. In Los Angeles, we're not going to be able to help, but have to have partners on the ground who are building the infrastructure, who are staffing the vertiport sites, who are running the service. So it's a little bit different than, say, the ride sharing model, where there's much more distribution of the actual operators of the aircraft. From our perspective, we just can't help but make those investments that are specific to the places where we're going to be. And then the last piece that I would flag is, for a service like ours, and I think what we're going to see with some of the bigger infrastructure constrained services, is that there's a great opportunity to not compete with communities that might be more NIMBYistic, and instead try to make a holistic investment where your service can operate and be a benefit at a community. And instead of, as we've seen historically with transportation, freeway exchanges disproportionately impacting, for instance, minority communities and communities with less political power, kind of turning that dynamic on its head and making some big capital investments, some big job creation investments in some of these communities. And that's an area where hopefully our economic incentives are aligned. We can find these places that are on the rebound, that are on the mend, and help create new jobs in those environments, and in a way that makes it an organic process of ensuring a diverse and equitable pipeline, instead of trying to make it an artifice. So that's been a big part of how we try to think about our go-to-market strategy.
Justine, I'll jump in sort of with the second part of your question, because I know I already talked a little bit about our STEM programs, but I think that you look at the history of clean energy and in the solar industry, energy efficiency, over time, so many of our communities have been left behind. And, we know that we cannot get to a place of carbon neutrality where we have an electrified economy if we have whole segments of our state that don't have the same access to this technology. So if we're looking to put 7 million electric vehicles on the road, we have to make sure that everybody has access to chargers, that everybody has access to the vehicles themselves. And there's still not price parity between an ICE vehicle and an electric vehicle, so we have to have those incentives, and we have to have the charging. I mean, in my opinion, I think it makes the most sense to have the utility do it, because investor-owned utilities have a duty to serve everybody. We don't make a profit over selling additional, electricity. So we have a different incentive there. But I think when we're developing these programs and our policies, we have to develop them through that lens. So for our programs that are approved by the Public Utilities Commission, we have targets to ensure that 40% or 50%, depending on the program, will go into a disadvantaged community. And I think that we need more of that, and that, access and equity needs to be the fundamental policy driver, along with in all of our clean energy policies at the state level as well. How we actually work with our communities, we have a number of working groups. We have Clean Energy Access Working Group that we have lots of representatives a part of from the community. I lead a team that's responsible for, it's called Energy and Equity Access, and they're responsible for ensuring that in our regulatory proceedings, we're putting those concerns forward and ensuring access and working with the community. But I think we all have a lot of work to do here to make sure we don't make those same mistakes of the past.
Laura, that's great. I mean, that's one of the challenges that we've had echo kind of along your lines, that it is as I mentioned before, a systems problem, and it's not an individual problem. It's a partnership of the municipalities, utilities, and the public organizations and the different government agencies. One of the things that we've really been engaging with as we talk to different organizations, and mainly with a lot of the municipalities that are in the region that we're kind of focusing on initially, is we always kind of get the dialogue to how are we going to help out, or how do we bring out aspects of some of these more underprivileged communities that are just economically a little bit depressed, or don't have access to the charging infrastructure. And it has to do with kind of like where how the infrastructure overall is there from commercial spaces too, to actually put chargers in and utility aspects in. And the good thing is, though, that there is a good focus coming in from the government, the local governments on that problem, and trying to bring that. We're trying to figure out how we can kind of bring solutions to like shuttle transports and things along that line to make those accessible and start bringing it in, so that you need to kind of bring in the chargers once you have the vehicles en route into that area. Right. And then also just a very good forward thinking from the different communities, and also from the federal government, as far as like some grants and such to kind of focus into underprivileged areas or economically depressed areas. And also with incentives we're seeing from different utility organizations that are actually offering higher incentives for things being implemented in those regions. So it's a joint problem. It's something that we got to take on together. It's a partnership. So it's something that has to be done.
Thank you. Diana, if you have any few words, and then I'll just bring us to a close.
Yeah, thank you, Justine. I think you asked a really important question, and unfortunately, we're kind of at the end of time here. But there's so much to unpack in that question, both on the in terms of how we are deploying our technology, because when you build infrastructure, it is really hard. It is really, really hard to build any kind of road, any kind of bridge, and when you're talking about building Hyperloop, that just adds a whole nother aspect of this kind of infrastructure that you're putting on the ground. And so a lot of what we do in conjunction with many of the local planning organizations and departments of transportation that we work with is actually understanding what the community wants, where we would locate the portals, how they would interact with them, and also what kind of service they would like to see. Because ultimately, we see Hyperloop as one of many transportation options that communities have. And we want to make sure it's the right one for that community. And so we do a lot of focus groups. We do a lot of community engagement workshops and panels to understand what are the needs of those communities. Sometimes people think of Hyperloop as a kind of luxury good almost because of this futuristic aspect of it. But really, I want to emphasize that it's not something that is for the privileged few. I mean, this is a mass transportation system that we are building, and we design it so that it is very affordable, very similar to driving or taking the train. You can take the Hyperloop, and we're intentionally designing it to be that way.
Thank you all so much. I know that I wish we had more time because I'm sure that there's so much more here for all of us to discuss, but I really want to say thank you each for one, just providing your time and making yourselves available today for this discussion. I hope this is not the last discussion. I hope we continue to have these discussions, especially as the world starts to electrify in many ways. So I thank you all, and I thank all of the attendees here. I saw the chat very active. So again, thank you all for your support as well and your input. And lastly, I just want to say a special thank you to Los Angeles Economic Development Corporation, as well as Cal State University Dominguez Hills for today's Future Forum series. Again, this is not going to be the last time we're having these discussions, but it is very important that we keep this momentum going in this particular space. That being said, I want to wish each of you all a wonderful day and see you again for another event. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.